Today, we're about to explore the most dumb animal attacks ever recorded. From a drunkard who bet his friends he could pet a jaguar to a teacher who thought tossing a banana to a silverback gorilla would make them friends.
On July 22, 2008, the summer sun heat beat down on Ocean Sky Marine Park near Tampa Bay, Florida. The midday orca show was minutes from beginning, and 28-year-old senior trainer Ariana Mendez was making her final preparations. Despite her outward professionalism, inside she was filled with dread, a feeling that had been growing for months as she observed disturbing changes in the behavior of Cairo, the park's star 21-foot male orca. Ariana had always felt more at home in the water than on land. After earning a degree in marine biology, she had landed what she considered her dream job at Ocean Sky. For nearly a decade, she had worked her way up from an entry-level position, eventually becoming the lead trainer for Cairo, the massive 12,000-pound orca that was the park's main attraction. But in the spring of 2017, Ariana began noticing concerning changes in Cairo's behavior. During training sessions, he would sometimes ignore commands he had followed flawlessly for years. During performances, he had begun slapping the water aggressively and making high-pitched vocalizations that Ariana had never heard before. On July 3rd, he had clamped his jaws around a training platform and violently shaken it, behavior that orca experts recognize as displaced aggression and a serious warning sign. After Cairo had grabbed Ariana's wetsuit during a routine and held her underwater longer than planned, she filed a safety report recommending his removal from performances. Park management noted her concerns but ultimately ignored them, prioritizing the summer show schedule. That July day, Ocean Sky Marine Park was packed with summer visitors. Despite her misgivings, Ariana took her position poolside for the sold-out midday orca show. The show began without incident, with Cairo performing perfectly for the delighted crowd. During the finale, as Ariana knelt with a fish bucket, Cairo approached as expected, but suddenly lunged upward, his massive jaws open as his head emerged from the water. Orcas possess the largest predator brain on Earth and demonstrate complex cultural behaviors, with captive specimens often showing psychological distress through repetitive behaviors and aggression, warning signs that confinement damages these intelligent mammals. Before Ariana could react, Cairo had clamped his teeth around her torso and pulled her into the water. The crowd's cheers turned to screams as they watched the trainer disappear beneath the surface. Underwater, Ariana remained conscious and remarkably calm, drawing on her years of training for this exact scenario. But the orca's behavior was different this time, more deliberate, more controlled. People watched in horror as Ariana was not resurfacing. 2 minutes later, Cairo finally broke the surface with Ariana limping in his grasp. Whether from the pressure of his bite or the lack of oxygen, she had lost consciousness. Cairo brought her to the surface almost gently, as if displaying his prize, before diving again and releasing her to float motionless in the water. Emergency responders were able to retrieve her body while other trainers distracted Cairo. Despite immediate CPR and the presence of medical staff on site, Ariana was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy revealed that she had suffered catastrophic internal injuries from the pressure of Cairo's jaws, with her ribcage crushed and several organs ruptured. It was May 28, 2024. Hayden Valley shimmered under the sun, the kind of heat that made tree bark sweat and the grass hum with insects. Alyssa Mercer adjusted her phone lens. She murmured into her chest-mounted camera that nature speaks to those who listen, and today she planned to show communion with one of Earth's most misunderstood giants. To her 87,000 subscribers, it was just another wild mindfulness vlog. Quiet reflections on harmony with nature, always barefoot, always earnest. But this one would be her last. Alyssa was a 28-year-old Texan. Having been attached to the hippie movement through pop culture, she had built her following around her belief in spiritual kinship with wild animals. Her blog featured poetic essays, barefoot hiking trips, and videos of her gently extending hands to deer, squirrel, even raccoons. She preached gentleness and trust, a trust she believed was reciprocal between human and animal when approached with stillness and love. But she was blind to her own recklessness. Her footage showed her sitting cross-legged within feet of a moose. She once posted a reel titled "Eye Contact with the Untamed," featuring a slow, breathy stare into a black bear's curious eyes, filmed from behind a thin veil of bushes. Park rangers had warned her twice before. Citations were issued. She paid them quietly and continued her work. On that May morning, Alyssa stood among the sun-bleached sage of Yellowstone, an apple in her hand and her camera strapped to her chest. The signs were everywhere. Do not approach wildlife, stay at least 25 yards from bison. But she viewed those as rules for tourists, not initiates like herself. Her target was a lone bull grazing near a sulfur creek, about 30 yards from where her Subaru sat baking in the sun. A small crowd had formed, watching nervously as Alyssa stepped barefoot into the field, murmuring about patience and indigenous symbolism. The American bison is far from a creature built for intimacy. It's a massive tank of muscles and horn. Adult males can weigh up to 2,000 pounds and stand over 6 feet tall at the shoulder, capable of running at speeds of up to 35 miles per hour. They don't snarl or growl, nor do they give barked warnings. Instead, when that blocky head lowers even slightly, it's a silent, deadly signal that the clock is ticking. As Alyssa closed the distance, her voice softened with reverence, urging viewers to sense the bison's energy and understand that she meant no harm. She held out the apple like an offering, her fingers trembling slightly. The bison looked up, chewing lazily, eyes dark and unreadable. For one long moment, the scene held still. Sunlight, silence, her outstretched arm bridging two worlds. But then, in a blink, the silence shattered. The bison lowered its massive head, muscles rippling beneath its thick hide, before lunging forward like an unstoppable freight train. The chest-mounted camera jerked violently, the lens spinning and catching glimpses of frantic movement. Dust kicking up, crushed twigs snapping beneath thunderous hooves, and Alyssa's desperate struggle to regain footing. Her sharp intake of breath pierced the chaos, a fleeting sound swallowed instantly by the roar of impact as the bison's powerful horns slammed into her side. The camera tumbled to the ground, capturing a blurred, chaotic whirl of grass and earth as she was thrown violently off balance, the crushing weight and force leaving no room for escape. Witnesses described it later with stunned dismay. The animal struck her square in the chest, flinging her 5 feet into the air before her body hit the earth in a crumpled heap. The bison didn't trample her, didn't need to. One hit was enough. It paused briefly, snorted, then returned to grazing as if nothing had happened. Tourists screamed. A man with a wide-brimmed hat yelled for someone to call 911. A ranger arrived minutes later, found Alyssa unconscious, pulse erratic. She died before the helicopter landed. The autopsy revealed massive internal trauma, ruptured organs, shattered ribs that punctured her lungs, and a severed aorta. Death had come within minutes of impact. Her phone, recovered by park investigators, held dozens of drafts and unpublished footage. Some showed her practicing the approach, whispering mantras. Others featured close-ups of wild animals blinking slowly. One video, dated the day before her death, included a moment where she looked directly into the lens and described bison as peaceful giants of Gaia's heart. The public response was swift and divided. Nature lovers mourned her as a misunderstood soul. Critics called her naive, even delusional. Others accused her of poisoning public perception of wildlife safety with fantasy-laden nonsense. But perhaps the most haunting detail came from a final clip, only 38 seconds long. It showed her standing at the edge of the grass, bison in the distance, apple in hand. The wind muffled her voice, but one sentence emerged clear: "If you trust them, they'll trust you." morning of August 12, 2016, dawned clear and crisp in Glacier National Park, Montana. Jared Kessler, a 23-year-old recent college graduate from Seattle, set out early with 4 friends, their backpacks loaded with water, trail mix, and the bear spray a park ranger had insisted they carry. Jared had always been the adventurous type, eager to document his adventures with breathtaking landscapes and daring outdoor exploits, always taking pictures and treating it like a prized possession. The night before their hike, a park ranger had warned them about recent bear sightings along the trail they planned to take, reminding them of the potential dangers ahead. For the first 2 hours, they followed the marked trail. It was around mid-morning when Jared spotted an unmarked path that branched off from the main trail and promised views of a hidden alpine lake. Despite the concerns of his more cautious friend Mike, Jared veered off, gesturing for the others to follow due to curiosity, wanting to see more than just the marked trail. The group had been hiking for about 20 minutes when they emerged into a small clearing, and there, not 50 yards away, appeared a massive grizzly bear. Grizzlies have the strongest bite force of any North American land mammal, up to 1,200 psi, and can smell from miles away. Fiercely protective mothers may fight to the death for their cubs, making them particularly dangerous in the backcountry where surprising one can trigger an instantaneous defensive charge at speeds of 35 miles per hour. While his friends exchanged nervous glances, Jared was already reaching for his camera. The bear's head suddenly snapped up, its nostrils flaring as it caught their scent. Then Jared did the unthinkable. He took another step forward, his camera clicking rapidly, startling the wild grizzly bear. Due to the sudden charge, Mike fumbled for the bear spray, urging Jared to back away. But it was too late. The bear covered the 50 yards in mere seconds. Mike managed to deploy the bear spray, creating a cloud of capsaicin that momentarily slowed the animal. Everyone scattered, except Jared, who stood transfixed, still trying to capture the perfect shot. The bear crashed through the spray, colliding with Jared with the force of a truck, taking him down. At that moment, his friends heard him scream before it cut off. The bear's massive jaws closed around his torso, giving no hope of survival. By the time park rangers arrived, it was far too late. They found Jared's body in the clearing, or what was left of it. The bear had dragged him several yards into the underbrush, an instinctual attempt to perceive a threat from open sight. It was November 26, 2014. The day began warm and dry in Limpopo. At the entrance to the private safari park, guests queued for their guided drives, unaware that one of the resident lionesses would not remain a distant photo subject for long. Brenda Whitaker, 44, had arrived 2 days earlier from Manchester, England with her husband Alan. Both were seasoned travelers, having visited Egypt, India, and Kenya in recent years. Friends describe Brenda as bold, sometimes to the point of overconfidence, especially around wildlife. She liked to say she had a way with animals, citing memories of feeding stray cats in Marrakesh or getting close to elephants in Sri Lanka. What the sheer foolishness of Brenda's actions failed to account for was the reality of the apex predator she was about to face. African lions are among the most powerful big cats on Earth, with females weighing over 400 pounds and possessing 10 times the strength of an adult human. Their massive jaws can exert 650 pounds of pressure per square inch, enough to crush bone instantly. Most critically, lions are ambush predators with lightning-fast reflexes, capable of covering 20 feet in a single bound and reaching speeds of 50 miles per hour in short bursts. Their vehicle for the morning was a modified open-sided 4x4 with 3 rows of bench seating and a canvas canopy with a local guide in the driver's seat. From the outset, his instructions were clear. Remain seated, keep arms and cameras inside, and keep all windows closed. The animals are not tame, he reminded them, and they don't know you're just here for photos. The group entered the park just after 9. After 40 minutes, the guide turned toward a shallow valley known for its lion pride. A lioness lay stretched on the short grass, head resting on her forepaws. She was an adult in prime condition. The guide eased the vehicle to a stop about 20 feet away. Cameras lifted, shutters clicked. Brenda, seated along the left side, unbuckled and leaned toward the side panel. The driver cautioned her to stay back, but she reached for the manual window crank, rolling it down until nothing separated her from the open air. She raised her DSLR, tilting it for a clear line of sight. Witnesses in the back row reported that Brenda foolishly began making soft, high-pitched kissing sounds toward the lioness. The cat's head came up immediately, eyes narrowing, ears locking forward. These warning signs, the direct stare, the forward-facing ears, the sudden alertness, are part of a lion's natural communication system that precedes an attack. In the wild, these signals warn other animals of imminent danger, but humans often misinterpret them as curiosity rather than the predatory focus they actually represent. Brenda shifted her weight, leaning halfway out, lens trained directly on the animal. Alan told her to sit back. She replied that she was just getting a better shot. The lioness rose in one fluid movement. Her body stayed low, shoulders rippling under her coat, the short distance between them closing far faster than most people in the vehicle seemed to register. The first contact was the head thrust, her muzzle driving through the window space, followed instantly by jaws locking around Brenda's throat. Lions typically kill large prey by suffocation, clamping their powerful jaws around the throat and cutting off air supply. This technique, perfected over countless generations, ensures a quick kill that minimizes the predator's risk of injury from struggling prey. The force was enough to pull her upper body clear of the vehicle. Her feet braced against the floor in reflex. Alan grabbed his wife around the waist, pulling hard, but the lioness anchored her hindquarters, dragging backward. The tearing was audible, flesh, fabric, and tendon parting under the sustained bite pressure. Brenda made a choking sound that collapsed into silence within seconds. The guide shouted and fired a warning shot into the air. The lioness released only after 2 more backward tugs. Brenda slumped against Alan, blood running down her front. The vehicle turned sharply, accelerating toward the nearest ranger station. Another guest pressed a towel to the wound, but the bleeding was catastrophic. Minutes passed by, and by the time they reached the park clinic, she was unresponsive. A staff nurse pronounced death at 10:14 a.m. Park management called local police to take statements and secured the scene. The lioness was identified as one of the dominant females of the pride, known for avoiding vehicles unless provoked. Rangers emphasized that her behavior matched natural predatory reflex once the perceived boundary between human and habitat was crossed. She was not euthanized and continued to roam the reserve. Alan chose to have his wife cremated in South Africa. The process was handled quietly, without public memorial at the park, and her ashes were flown back to Manchester the following week. UK news outlets carried brief stories on the incident, often referencing similar attacks in other parks, but without publishing graphic details. The valley where the attack occurred remains part of the lion viewing route, but the guide who drove that morning has since left the park.
It was October 12th, 2015, at a research site off the Bahamas where coral reefs dropped into deep blue water and currents carried nutrients that attracted both small fish and the predators that hunted them. The morning sun penetrated 30 feet down through crystal clear water, illuminating brain coral formations and schools of yellowtail snappers that moved in synchronized waves across the reef face. Cassian Bell, a a 29-year-old marine biologist from Australia, had arrived with two graduate students to continue behavioral observations of a tagged tiger shark that frequented this particular section of reef. The research vessel anchored in 60 feet of water, where the bottom transitioned from coral to sand, creating an ideal observation platform for studying shark feeding patterns and territorial behavior. Cassian had spent 8 years working with dangerous marine species without serious incident, building a reputation for methodical safety protocols and respect for the animals he studied. His rebreather system allowed for extended bottom time and minimal bubble disturbance, making it perfect for close-range behavioral documentation. The morning dive plan called for a 40-minute observation session at depth, with the tagged shark already located and displaying normal hunting behavior near a cleaning station. Unknown to the team, recent equipment maintenance had introduced a subtle fault in the rebreather's carbon dioxide scrubbing system that would manifest only under specific depth and exertion conditions. Tiger sharks are opportunistic apex predators that rely on electrical sensitivity, vibration detection, and visual cues to locate prey. They are particularly responsive to erratic movement patterns and surface disturbance, which often indicate injured or distressed animals. Unlike great whites, tiger sharks are more likely to investigate unusual stimuli through direct contact, using their powerful jaws to test potential food sources. Their hunting strategy involves approaching from below or from the side, using their broad, serrated teeth to deliver devastating bite wounds that cause rapid blood loss and incapacitation. At 40 feet depth, Cassian's rebreather began accumulating carbon dioxide beyond safe levels due to the scrubber malfunction. The buildup triggered an emergency response as his body detected the dangerous gas concentration. He initiated an immediate ascent, rising far faster than recommended for controlled rebreather diving, prioritizing escape over normal ascent discipline. Upon reaching the surface, his buoyancy compensator failed to inflate properly due to a jammed inflator mechanism, and his integrated weight system refused to release when activated. Unable to achieve positive buoyancy, he began kicking frantically to stay afloat while attempting to orally inflate his vest. The violent surface activity occurred directly above the area where the tagged tiger shark had been feeding. The 14-foot female detected the commotion and approached from below, drawn by the irregular splashing and electrical signatures from his struggling movements. The shark's initial approach was investigatory, but the continued surface disturbance triggered a feeding response. The tiger shark struck from beneath, its jaws closing around Cassian's lower torso and right hip. The bite force crushed his pelvis and severed major blood vessels in his groin area. The shark's serrated teeth created massive tissue damage as it shook its head from side to side before releasing him. Blood dispersed rapidly in the water as Cassian lost motor control in his lower body. The shark circled back within seconds, attracted by the blood trail and continued movement. The shark returned moments later, drawn back by the heavy blood plume, and delivered a second bite to his upper thigh. The massive blood loss caused rapid unconsciousness, as his blood pressure dropped catastrophically. Unable to maintain buoyancy with his damaged equipment and failing strength, Cassian slipped beneath the surface. Water entered his lungs as he lost the ability to coordinate breathing. Death occurred from a combination of massive hemorrhage, drowning, and traumatic shock within minutes of the initial attack. The graduate students on the research vessel immediately activated emergency protocols when they observed the surface disturbance and blood in the water. Coast Guard rescue teams arrived within 20 minutes, but could only recover Cassian's body from the seafloor using remotely operated equipment. Investigation revealed the rebreather malfunction and buoyancy system failures that had created the emergency situation. The equipment manufacturer issued a safety bulletin regarding the specific scrubber component that had failed, leading to enhanced inspection protocols for research diving operations. Cassian's family established a scholarship fund for marine biology students, emphasizing the importance of equipment redundancy and emergency training.
On a warm evening in July 2019, as the Florida sun began to set over Ocala, Laura Benwick prepared for what would be her final interaction with her beloved reptile collection. The 37-year-old exotic pet enthusiast moved through her modest home, which had long ago been transformed into what she proudly called her serpent sanctuary. Laura had built a reputation among local exotic pet enthusiasts as the woman who could handle anything with scales. Her fascination with reptiles began in childhood when her father, a wildlife biologist, would take her on expeditions into the Everglades. By her 30s, what started as a hobby had evolved into an obsession that consumed her life, her savings, and eventually her marriage. Laura's home housed over 20 snakes ranging from harmless corn snakes to deadly venomous species that required special permits that Laura didn't bother to obtain. Her neighbors had filed numerous complaints about her collection, particularly after 2 separate escape incidents in 2018. Yet she continued to ignore such hazards, and living in a very rural area, no authorities prioritized her neighbors' concerns. On that fateful evening, Laura was preparing to clean the enclosure of her prized possession, a monocled cobra she had illegally purchased through an underground exotic pet network. She'd named him King, and often boasted about his perfect hood pattern and aggressive striking behavior. Her usual snake-handling assistant had canceled at the last minute, but Laura had decided to proceed with the cleaning anyway, skipping her protective gloves since there hadn't been any incident prior to this moment. As Laura opened the enclosure, King was unusually active, swaying back and forth with his hood fully expanded, a warning sign that Laura either missed or chose to ignore. Unlike many snakes that flee from confrontation, the monocled cobra actively stands its ground when threatened, capable of delivering enough neurotoxic venom in a single bite to kill 20 adults. She reached in with a hook to move him to a temporary container, but King was faster. In a flash of movement, the cobra struck, sinking its fangs deep into the flesh between her thumb and index finger. At first, Laura remained calm. She secured King back in his enclosure and called 911. But within minutes, her speech began to slur as the neurotoxins attacked her nervous system. By the time EMTs arrived, Laura was deteriorating rapidly. Without immediate access to the specific anti-venom needed, the medical team could only provide supportive care. Laura died in the intensive care unit just hours after the bite, her body succumbing to respiratory failure as the powerful neurotoxins paralyzed her diaphragm. It was June 14, 2018. Limpopo National Park is not only home to a wide array of wildlife, but also sprawling savannas, towering baobab trees, and crystal clear watering holes. The park also boasts over 240 miles of game drive routes that usually burst with activity as animals gather at dawn and dusk, creating a stunning display of natural beauty. It's a place of unparalleled majesty that every wildlife enthusiast dreams of setting foot in. Marco Borghese was a man shaped by both precision and passion, a careful planner who could still be overtaken by the lure of a fleeting moment. As an architect, he was methodical and disciplined, but when it came to photography, his judgment often gave way to impulse. The pursuit of beauty, of capturing something rare and perfect, sometimes clouded the caution he otherwise lived by. His wife Sylvia, a thoughtful and grounded literature teacher, brought calm balance to Marco's intensity. Their 11-year-old son Luca shared his father's curiosity and his mother's gentleness, eagerly absorbing everything he could about African wildlife before the trip. And thus, it was no surprise that on the 14th of June 2018, Italian nationals Marco and Silvia Borghese, together with their son Luca, headed to the park expecting a fun-filled family adventure. The trio was excited to be there. They spent the first 2 days exploring and watching elephants at the main watering hole. However, Marco wanted to quench his thirst for seeing the famous African lions. And so, on the third day, guide Themba Ndlovu handed Marco his private safari permit for the exclusive western section of the reserve. The guide reminded him of how wild the lions of Limpopo Park were and warned him against exiting the vehicle or approaching predators on foot. That morning, the trio talked about their plans for the day. They would drive 6 miles to the Acacia Plains where they hoped to spot a pride of lions in their natural habitat. After photographing the wildlife, they would proceed to a luxury tented camp where they would spend their final night before flying back to Florence. The morning came and the family, sticking to their plan, made their way to the Acacia Plains. Along the way, they saw a large placard warning of the untamed wilderness within the African bush. At the junction of two roads, Themba pointed out fresh lion tracks and reminded them to remain in the vehicle at all times. Aware of high predator activity, Marco knew the key to getting the perfect shot was patience, but the spur of excitement gave him tunnel vision. A few hours into their drive, Marco was attracted by the sight of a massive male lion. They had arrived at a lone acacia tree, and there they found a magnificent beast, belly distended from a recent kill, blood still fresh around its muzzle. Marco was only 40 feet away from his designated photo opportunity, but his desire for the perfect family portrait was overwhelming to him. He set his camera to timer mode as he watched the sun sink toward the horizon. After setting up the shot, he signaled to Sylvia and Luca to join him. He then changed into photographer mode and took out his camera. Marco then stepped out of the vehicle with his family following behind. Themba warned him, but his words drowned in the tourist excitement. He placed his camera on a nearby rock with his head near the viewfinder. He set the timer and hurried to join his wife and son, but Marco didn't notice as a shadow stirred beneath the tree. The male lion cautiously lifted its head, tasting the air as it observed the intruders. The smell of potential danger drew it to full alertness as the 11-year-old Luca was peacefully posing just 5 feet away. While many see them as majestic and regal, lions' behavior remains strictly primal. The male African lion, which can weigh up to 420 pounds, is capable of reaching speeds of 50 miles per hour in short bursts. Though they often appear lethargic during the day, especially after feeding, lions can switch into attack mode in seconds if they sense a threat or opportunity. With a single fluid bound, the lion cleared the 10 feet separating it from the family. In an instant, it lunged low and thrust its massive head forward. Its jaws opened wide, and with terrifying precision, it clamped down around Luca's neck and upper back. The boy's scream cut through the air, but only briefly as the lion's fangs punctured through the skin, bone, and into the base of his skull. His small frame was yanked violently from his feet, the sheer force of the bite cracking vertebrae and crushing part of his rib cage. The lion dragged Luca backward through the dust and grass, his limbs flailing, his cries turning into wet gasps. Blood pooled rapidly in the dirt. Marco, eyes wild with panic, surged forward in a blind sprint. He hurled himself toward his son, shouting his names, arms outstretched. The lion dropped Luca abruptly and spun, baring its teeth. With a low, guttural growl, it met Marco's charge with a blinding swipe of its paw. Claws like hooked blades slashed clean through Marco's chest, ripping flesh from sternum to stomach. Ribs snapped audibly as the blow sent Marco staggering backward. A geyser of blood sprayed across the tall grass. He collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest, coughing blood, still reaching with trembling fingers toward his son's limp form. Sylvia stood paralyzed, her face pale, mouth open in a silent scream. The scene before her barely registered before instinct finally took hold. She turned to run, but only managed a few desperate steps. The lion, now whipped into a full frenzy by the scent of blood and movement, roared and charged again. It closed the distance in seconds. As Sylvia ran, her foot caught on a stone hidden beneath the grass, and she stumbled. Before she could regain her balance, the lion launched forward. Its body collided with hers mid-stride, driving her to the ground like a battering ram. The sounds of bones snapping beneath its weight echoed grotesquely. Her left arm jerked outward in a reflexive, hopeless attempt to push away the crushing force. But it was only a second before her body went still beneath the beast's weight. While all of this happened instantaneously, Themba was frantically radioing for backup from the vehicle. He had known them to be reasonable people, and so as the seconds passed by, he grew desperate. Soon seconds turned to minutes and his feelings grew to horror. He hurriedly called park headquarters, where he informed the ranger on duty about the attack. The ranger immediately issued an emergency response alert in the park. At 4:15 p.m., the alert of a lion attack finally got to the armed response team, who instantly embarked on a rescue mission. When they arrived at the scene, they found the lion still guarding its victims. It was here that the beast had stopped its attack and was now watching over the bodies. Due to the fading light, the rangers had a rough time approaching safely. But after securing the area, they finally reached the victims, but it was too late. Marco's chest had been torn open to the ribs, his skull crushed beyond recognition, and his arms and abdomen mauled to the muscle. Sylvia was found nearby with her back ripped open and spine shattered. Luca had fatal neck and facial injuries, likely from a crushing bite. That evening, the Borghese family's remains were transported to the nearest medical facility. On June 20th, 2018, their extended family arrived from Italy to repatriate the bodies. What was supposed to be a fun family vacation had turned out to be the most grotesque lion attack in the history of Limpopo National Park. To this day, the ferocious male lion that ended the family's lives has not been euthanized and is still roaming around the Acacia Plains in Limpopo. What made this tragedy particularly disturbing is the recovery of the camera. The final image captured shows the family smiling, unaware, while behind them the lion's eyes are already fixed, pupils dilated, muscles tensed. The camera's timer had given them just enough time to pose, but not enough time to live.
It was June 22nd, 2016, and the calm waters of Galveston Bay reflected the late afternoon sun as charter boat captain Miguel Santos prepared to clean his most impressive catch of the day. The 34-year-old fisherman had been working these Texas waters for over 12 years, building a reputation among clients for his fearless approach to handling dangerous marine life. His boat was moored in a quiet cove where Miguel often processed his catches away from the busy marina traffic. Miguel had started his fishing career as a teenager working on his uncle's shrimp boat, gradually learning every aspect of Gulf Coast fishing before saving enough money to purchase his own charter vessel. His clients appreciated his extensive knowledge of local fish species and his willingness to pursue the larger, more dangerous catches that other captains avoided. The day's charter had been particularly successful, with Miguel landing a 6-foot bull shark that had provided his clients with an exciting fight and plenty of photo opportunities. After returning his clients to shore, Miguel had decided to keep the shark for processing the whole animal, planning to use the meat himself rather than selling it to local fish markets. He had handled dozens of similar sharks over the years, and considered himself an expert on their behavior patterns. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous shark species in the world, known for their aggressive nature and ability to survive in both saltwater and freshwater environments. Adult bulls can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with incredibly powerful jaws containing rows of triangular serrated teeth designed for tearing flesh. These sharks possess remarkable resilience and can remain dangerous for extended periods even when removed from water. Miguel had been cleaning fish on his boat's stern platform when he decided to tackle the bull shark, which had been lying on the deck for only a few minutes since being hauled aboard. The shark showed minimal signs of movement as Miguel approached with his filleting knife, its gills pumping slowly and its eyes still responsive to light. As Miguel positioned himself beside the shark for a quick selfie to document his impressive catch, he placed his left hand on the animal's head while holding his phone with his right hand. The shark appeared nearly motionless as Miguel adjusted his angle to capture both himself and the massive predator in the frame. The bull shark's sudden reflex response caught Miguel completely off guard as the animal's primitive nervous system triggered an involuntary defensive reaction. The shark's massive jaws snapped shut with tremendous force, its razor-sharp teeth creating severe lacerations across Miguel's wrist and forearm while puncturing major arteries. Miguel's scream of pain and shock echoed across the empty bay as the shark immediately released its grip. Miguel's panicked reaction to the severe bite wound caused him to lose his balance on the wet deck, and he tumbled backward over the boat's edge into the warm Gulf waters. The blood streaming from his mangled arm immediately began attracting marine predators in the area, while his weakened condition from arterial bleeding made swimming back to his boat increasingly difficult. Miguel struggled in the water for several minutes as blood loss began affecting his strength and coordination. The scent of blood in the water gradually attracted a large bull shark that had been following the boat's fish cleaning activities. As Miguel's movements became weaker and more erratic, the massive predator approached with the confidence that characterized his species when investigating potential prey. The attacking shark struck Miguel with devastating force, its powerful jaws inflicting fatal wounds that ended his struggles within seconds. Miguel's body disappeared beneath the surface of Galveston Bay as the predator dragged him into deeper water. Miguel's wife reported him missing the following morning when he failed to return home, but rough weather conditions delayed the Coast Guard search until late afternoon. The investigation revealed evidence of shark attack and determined that Miguel had likely fallen overboard while cleaning his catch. His boat was found anchored in the cove with the partially processed bull shark still on deck. The incident prompted renewed discussions about solo fishing safety and the dangers of handling large predatory fish without proper assistance. Miguel's death became a sobering reminder that marine predators can remain dangerous even when they appear incapacitated. It was August 22, 2016, at a remote Arctic research station in northern Canada, where endless expanses of tundra stretched beneath a sky that never fully darkened during the brief summer season. The landscape consisted of permafrost, scattered boulders, and low-growing vegetation that provided little shelter from the constant wind. Temperatures hovered just above freezing even in late summer, while the proximity to Hudson Bay created unpredictable weather patterns that could shift from calm to violent within hours. Gideon Stone, a 32-year-old climate researcher and environmental activist, had established the temporary camp with his wife Sarah to conduct a population study of polar bears in the region. Their work focused on documenting the effects of reduced sea ice on bear behavior and hunting patterns, research that Gideon believed could influence conservation policy. The couple had spent 2 years in polar bear country, learning to respect the animals while maintaining safe distances through proper protocols. Their camp consisted of reinforced shelters, a perimeter bear fence powered by solar batteries, and tripwire alarm systems designed to detect approaching wildlife. Emergency equipment included flares, air horns, and satellite communication devices for evacuation requests. The research had proceeded without major incidents, with several bears observed and documented from safe distances. Recent weather reports had warned of an approaching storm system, but the couple decided to remain in position to complete their final data collection before the season ended. The storm's intensity exceeded all forecasts, bringing sustained winds that would test every piece of equipment designed to keep the researchers safe from the region's apex predator. Polar bears are the largest terrestrial carnivores, with adult males weighing up to 800 pounds and possessing incredible strength adapted for hunting seals on sea ice. During ice-free periods, these bears face starvation as their primary food sources become inaccessible, driving them to seek alternative nutrition wherever available. Hungry polar bears will investigate any potential food source, including human camps, and their powerful sense of smell can detect scents from miles away. Unlike other bear species, polar bears show little fear of humans and will actively stalk potential prey. Their hunting strategy involves patient stalking, followed by explosive bursts of speed, using their massive paws and jaws to deliver fatal attacks. A polar bear's bite force exceeds that of any other bear species, while their claws can tear through most materials with ease. The storm struck with unprecedented fury, generating winds exceeding 80 miles per hour that collapsed sections of the research shelter and tore down large portions of the bear fence. Tripwire alarms failed as their power connections severed, while blowing snow reduced visibility to mere feet. Gideon emerged from the damaged shelter to attempt emergency radio repairs, knowing that their satellite communication represented their only link to rescue services. The howling wind masked all sound as he worked frantically to restore contact with the outside world. An undernourished male polar bear, driven by extreme hunger after weeks without successful hunting, had been tracking the camp's scent for hours through the deteriorating weather. The storm provided perfect cover for his approach, allowing him to move within striking distance undetected. The bear's massive form materialized from the swirling snow as Gideon knelt beside the radio equipment. The attack came without warning as the bear struck from behind, his enormous paw slamming into Gideon's back with crushing force. The impact drove him face first into the frozen ground, fracturing his skull against the hard-packed snow. The bear's claws raked across his spine, tearing through his heavy winter clothing and reaching the vertebrae beneath. The bear clamped its jaws onto the back of his upper torso and neck area, applying enough force to crush the cervical spine through his protective layers. The bear then dragged his body away from the shelter, driven by starvation to drag him several yards away from the shelter before attempting to feed. Gideon's death was instantaneous from the severe spinal trauma. Though the bear continued its feeding behavior for several minutes before the storm intensified, and drove the animal to seek shelter elsewhere. Search and rescue operations could not begin until the storm subsided 3 days later, when satellite emergency beacons finally transmitted clear distress signals. Recovery teams found evidence of the bear attack and the extensive damage to the camp's protective systems. Investigation revealed that the storm's intensity had exceeded all Weather Service predictions, overwhelming safety equipment designed for normal Arctic conditions. The bear responsible was never located, having likely moved on in search of other food sources. Wildlife officials emphasized that the attack resulted from equipment failure during extreme weather, rather than any deficiency in the researchers' safety protocols. Gideon's family released statements supporting continued Arctic research while calling for enhanced emergency shelter designs capable of withstanding severe storm conditions. The incident prompted reviews of safety standards for remote research stations, leading to improved storm-resistant fence designs and backup power systems for critical safety equipment.
The evening of September 8, 2018 was warm and clear in Las Vegas, Nevada. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the sprawling 15-acre estate of Mitchell Raves, illuminating the mansion and the custom-built exotic animal enclosures that stretched behind it. Inside, Mitchell was preparing to impress a group of potential investors with the crown jewel of his private collection, a magnificent 4-year-old male Bengal tiger named Raja. At 48, Mitchell had everything money could buy. The self-made tech millionaire had amassed a fortune developing security software that was now used by governments and corporations worldwide. His estate stood as a monument to his success, a 20,000 square foot mansion and his most prized possession, a private exotic animal collection that rivaled many small zoos. Mitchell had grown up poor in rural Kentucky. His childhood had been defined by scarcity and limitations, fueling an adult life dedicated to excess. If something caught his interest, he acquired it regardless of cost, practicality, or legality. The staff who maintained Mitchell's menagerie consisted of 3 full-time animal keepers, all with some zoological experience, though none specifically with big cats. They had repeatedly urged Mitchell to hire a specialized tiger trainer, particularly as Raja grew to his full size of nearly 500 pounds. Mitchell had eventually relented, bringing on Carlos Mendoza, a former circus animal trainer with 20 years of experience working with tigers. Carlos had established strict protocols for these interactions. Mitchell was never to enter the enclosure alone, was required to carry a CO2 fire extinguisher, and most importantly, was never to turn his back on Raja. This last rule was one that Carlos emphasized repeatedly, explaining that in tiger body language, turning your back can be interpreted as either a sign of submission or an invitation to pounce. For several months, Mitchell had grudgingly followed these rules. But as time passed without incident, Mitchell's natural impatience with restrictions reasserted itself. He began making excuses to enter the enclosure when Carlos was off duty, ignoring the great harm of such actions. On the day of the incident, Mitchell was hosting a dinner party for potential investors in his newest tech venture. The group of 8 businessmen and women had been suitably impressed by the mansion, the gourmet meal prepared by Mitchell's private chef, and the exotic birds and smaller animals they had been shown. But Mitchell had saved his most impressive attraction for last. Mitchell announced to his guests that he'd like to offer them a truly unique experience, being within touching distance of a Bengal tiger. Mitchell led his guests to the private zoo area behind the main house. Raja was in his outdoor habitat, a 1-acre space with a small pool, several large rocks for climbing, and artificial trees that provided shade. The tiger was immediately alert at the approach of visitors, rising from where he had been resting and moving to the edge of the enclosure nearest the viewing platform. As the guests expressed their awe at the magnificent animal, Mitchell reached for the gate that led to a safety corridor and then into the enclosure itself. One of the junior keepers, a young woman named Tasha, who had been assigned to accompany the tour, stepped forward anxiously. She reminded Mitchell that Carlos had left strict instructions that no one should enter Raja's enclosure without him present. Mitchell waved away her concern and entered the enclosure carrying a bucket of meat treats, chicken pieces that the tiger particularly enjoyed. For the first minute or so, the interaction proceeded without incident. Michael tossed pieces of chicken to Raja, who caught them mid-air or picked them delicately from the ground. Then one of his guests called out, asking if Mitchell could pet Raja like a real cat. Mitchell, never one to back down from a challenge, especially in front of an audience, nodded confidently. He reached out slowly, his hand extending toward the top of Raja's massive head. The tiger allowed the contact, seemingly unbothered as Mitchell stroked between his ears. As Mitchell reached for another piece of chicken, Raja's body language shifted subtly but significantly. The tiger's ears flattened slightly, his tail stiffened and began to twitch at the tip rather than swaying smoothly. And almost imperceptibly, he lowered his center of gravity, tensing his powerful hindquarters in preparation. These were the classic pre-attack indicators that Mitchell, focused on impressing his audience, completely missed. Bengal tigers possess night vision 6 times better than humans and can hear frequencies beyond human range, with specialized neck muscles capable of delivering a killing bite with pinpoint accuracy to the cervical spine, a lethal efficiency that has earned them the distinction of causing more human fatalities than any other big cat, particularly when humans turn their backs, which tigers instinctively interpret as either submission or an invitation to pounce. Encouraged by his success and the reaction of his audience, Mitchell decided to escalate the performance. Mitchell held out a large piece of chicken and Raja took it gently from his palm. Emboldened, Mitchell reached into the bucket for another piece. As he did so, he made the fatal error that Carlos had warned against countless times. He turned his back to the tiger. The attack was lightning fast. Raja lunged forward, his powerful jaws clamping around the back of Mitchell's neck. The force of the bite severed Mitchell's spinal cord instantly, killing him before he could even register pain. The tiger then dragged Mitchell's body further into the enclosure away from the gate, a natural behavior when securing prey. Guests watched in shock and horror after seeing such a thing happen before their eyes, screaming and running away. By the time the other keepers arrived and managed to drive Raja into his indoor holding area, Mitchell had been dead for several minutes. His body, when recovered, showed the devastating efficiency of a tiger's killing bite, a crushed cervical vertebrae and severed carotid artery. It was July 19, 2022. The sky over Coral Key, Florida was brushed in cotton pink dust. The sea calm, the beach empty, and the warnings, bold red and repeated, ignored. Jared McIntyre adjusted his chest strap on his GoPro with meticulous confidence. He wasn't reckless, he told himself. He was calculated. After all, he had planned this for weeks. His girlfriend, Melissa Drake, trailed behind him with the easy laughter of someone used to treating boundaries like mere suggestions. They weren't kids, they were 27 and 25 respectively. But something about the forbidden always thrilled them. Jared McIntyre and Melissa Drake were the kind of people either admired or quietly winced at. Restless, beautiful, and just smart enough to be dangerous. Jared was the brains of their stunts, always strategizing for the next viral moment, but his confidence often edged into delusion. Melissa, light-footed and wild-spirited, followed wherever the adrenaline led. They weren't stupid, not exactly, but they had a habit of treating close calls like plot points, not warnings. A busted drone battery mid-cliff dive, a near arrest after trespassing in a drained water park, their luck had always held. They believed it always would. Jared had been chasing the next big moment for his growing YouTube channel. The subscriber count was stuck under 12,000 and engagement was waning. He wanted the shot, the uncut, jaw-dropping shot that would blow up online. Glimmering blue waters, golden hour lighting, and the illusion of untamed adventure. Melissa had been in his corner from the start. A yoga instructor and self-described vibe chaser, she believed in Jared's dream and fed off the adrenaline of his escapades. Earlier that afternoon, the pair had wandered past the chain-link barrier that cordoned off the eastern stretch of the beach. Posted in thick lettering were signs from both the Coast Guard and Wildlife Commission. No entry, shark feeding zone, 4 p.m. to sunset. These weren't idle suggestions. This section of the shoreline had been designated off-limits during feeding hours for over a decade. The tides in this pocket drew fish migrations, and with them large predatory sharks. Bull sharks, blacktips, even the occasional tiger shark. Budget cuts and staff shortages after Hurricane Wesley had left this section unpatrolled for the season. A detail buried in a quietly updated public safety memo no tourist ever read. But Jared saw the signs as props for his narrative. Danger sold. Melissa danced barefoot in the sand behind him, tossing her sundress to the side to reveal her swimsuit like they were just two lovers chasing a sunset. They weren't breaking into a war zone. They thought they were dipping into nature's raw beauty. They waded in slowly. Jared angled the GoPro downward, narrating with a practiced voice, already envisioning how the footage would splice together. Melissa twirled in the shallows, letting her fingers skim the surface. The water around them remained deceptively calm, the surface calm as glass. No lifeguards, no patrol boats, just a mile of restricted ocean, empty except for two people who believed rules didn't apply to them. Beneath that glassy stillness, however, something else moved, unseen but not far. Bull sharks, which are notoriously aggressive and highly territorial, tend to frequent shallow coastal waters. They're unique in their ability to tolerate fresh water, allowing them to hunt in estuaries and river mouths, but in this case, they were drawn by fish blood and bait dumped by marine biologists conducting controlled feedings offshore. But sharks don't circle ominously like in movies. They attack fast, often without warning. It happened fast. Melissa was closest to the drop-off, laughing as she dipped beneath the surface, unaware that a dorsal fin had just sliced the water 20 feet away. Jared's attention was on the horizon, panning his camera across the skyline, oblivious to the silent mass that was already closing in. Then came the sound, a ragged, gurgling scream that didn't sound like any word, just panic clawing its way out of a throat filled with salt water. The bull shark was massive, over 8 feet, and it surged forward with brutal efficiency. Melissa was yanked downward only to reappear in pieces. Her legs kicked weakly as the shark clamped down again, this time dragging her farther toward deeper water. Jared tried to grab her wrist but only got her hair, which slipped through his fingers slick with blood. Jared fought to keep her afloat, pulling her toward the shore, but she was limp and screaming. He tried kicking at the water as if it would deter the predator now fixated on her. But a second shark appeared, then a third. One darted beneath them, grazing his thigh with rough skin like sandpaper. Another tried to bite his torso, barely grazing him, but ripping his GoPro off. Panic became survival. He let go of her and frantically swam to shore. By the time Jared stumbled onto the sand, he was retching. His legs were shaking, his hands trembling as he stared back at the surf. Melissa was gone, just gone. It had been under 10 minutes since they entered the water. Rescue teams didn't arrive until nearly an hour later, alerted by beachgoers who had spotted Jared screaming and stumbling along the closed-off road. A search was mounted, helicopters dispatched, but Melissa's body was never recovered in full. What little they found, shredded swimwear, strands of hair, bloodied sea foam, washed up the next day several miles downshore. The GoPro was found a week later by local fishermen who caught it with a net, but it was beyond repair. The memory card was also irrecoverable. In the weeks that followed, Jared stopped speaking to reporters. He gave no interviews, issued no statements, and refused to answer the endless questions from Melissa's family. He drifted between motel rooms along the Gulf Coast, aimless and quiet, the sunburn on his shoulders peeling into pale, sickly patches. People recognize him sometimes, whispers in gas stations, sidelong glances at diners, but no one ever approached. He'd entered the water chasing legacy and came out with absence. Not even a body to bury. The night of November 15, 2013, was bitterly cold in Novosibirsk, Russia. But the temperature did little to cool the spirits of Ivan Petrov and his friends as they celebrated a birthday at a local bar near the city zoo. The vodka flowed freely, and with each shot, their ideas grew more outlandish. At 24, Ivan was the life of the party. The charismatic engineering student was known for his boisterous laugh, his willingness to try anything once, and his seemingly endless capacity for vodka. By midnight, Ivan and his 5 friends were heavily intoxicated. It was the birthday boy Mikhail who eventually proposed the fatal challenge of breaking into the zoo and taking a selfie with one of the animals. Ivan declared he wouldn't just get a picture with any animal, but with the zoo's Siberian tiger. The group left the bar around 1:30 a.m., stumbling through the quiet streets toward the zoo. As they approached the main entrance, 2 of the friends sobered up enough to have second thoughts and decided to head home. The remaining 4 continued on, fueled by alcohol and the invincibility of youth. Once inside, they found themselves in a darkened landscape of pathways and enclosures. After passing several exhibits, they arrived at what they believed was the tiger habitat. Alexei suggested they find the visitors' platform, but Ivan, impatient and emboldened by alcohol, spotted what appeared to be a shortcut, a 7-foot wall that he assumed would lead to the viewing platform. Despite Dmitri's uncertainty, Ivan scrambled up the wall and gave his friends a thumbs up before disappearing over to the other side. There was a moment of silence, then a sound that would haunt the 3 remaining friends for the rest of their lives. A wet, crunching impact followed by a high-pitched scream that cut off almost as quickly as it began. Alexei realized with horror what had happened. Ivan had jumped directly into the tiger enclosure itself, not onto a viewing platform. Masters of stealth, despite their massive size, Siberian tigers can move silently through their territory on specialized footpads, striking with mathematical precision as they calculate exactly how much force to apply when killing different prey. In a panic, Dmitri pulled out his phone and turned on his flashlight. His shaking hands captured a massive Siberian tiger crouched over Ivan's body. The big cat's initial attack was a powerful strike with its paw, knocking Ivan unconscious and fracturing his skull. The tiger then dragged his limp body several yards before delivering multiple bites to his neck and torso. The 3 friends fled in terror, their screams finally alerting the zoo's night security guard, who called emergency services. By the time police and zoo officials arrived, Ivan was long dead, his body so severely mauled that identification was initially difficult. It was June 18, 2016, and the air over Pelican Valley in Yellowstone carried a sharp, resinous scent from the lodgepole pines. Beyond them, a large shape hunched low over a carcass, ready to defend its kill from unwary visitors. Brian Cooper was a 29-year-old warehouse worker from Idaho Falls, known among his friends for his willingness to take dares without much hesitation. Born and raised in Pocatello, he'd grown up fishing with his father but had little experience in true backcountry conditions. The camping trip to Yellowstone with 2 longtime friends had been planned as a weekend escape, a mix of fishing, hiking, and getting off the grid. Those close to him described him as sociable, quick to make jokes, and rarely inclined to pass up a chance for a story he could retell later. They underestimated how much of a fool he would be that day. They had set up camp in the permitted backcountry zone northeast of Pelican Creek, carrying standard gear and a single canister of bear spray between them. The plan was a short hike out along a meadow trail that morning, keeping near the marked path before turning back for fishing later in the day. The weather was stable, clear skies, temperatures in the upper 60s. About 90 minutes into their hike, they spotted movement beyond a rise. Following the slope down, the 3 saw a grizzly bear bent over the body of a partially scavenged bison. The distance was roughly 150 feet, close enough to see the lift and fall of the bear's shoulders as it tore into the carcass. Grizzly bears can weigh up to 1,500 pounds and run at speeds of 35 miles per hour, faster than Olympic sprinters. Their massive paws are equipped with claws up to 4 inches long, capable of disemboweling prey with a single swipe. Their bite force of over 1,200 pounds per square inch is enough to crush a bowling ball. These aren't just impressive statistics. They're evolutionary adaptations that have made grizzlies the apex predators of the northern wilderness for millennia. The open meadows spread in a shallow basin between forested ridges. To their left, a narrow drainage cut a line toward the river. There was no wind shift, no cover-to-mask movement, just open grass. The bear was an adult male, by later estimates weighing 600 to 700 pounds. Grizzlies are apex omnivores, protective of food sources and documented to react aggressively when approached within 300 feet of a carcass. The posted warnings at the trailhead that week have been explicit. Avoid carcass sites, carry bear spray, and back away slowly if a bear is encountered. One of Brian's friends muttered that they should turn back, noting the animal's size and proximity. Brian stepped forward instead, phone in hand, holding it high and calling out toward the bear in an exaggerated, mocking tone. His friends called to him to stop, their voices low but urgent. He glanced back briefly, stupidly grinning, then continued. At about 60 feet, the bear stopped feeding and raised its head. The huff it gave was deep, short, and carried clearly across the grass. It lowered its head slightly, ears forward, a clear warning sign that Brian either didn't recognize or chose to ignore. Brian raised the phone again, angling it toward himself and the bear behind him. He had just shifted his weight forward when the grizzly lunged. The movement was immediate. One moment the bear was still, the next it was charging at full speed. It crossed the ground in less than 2 seconds, covering the distance with shocking velocity. The first impact hit Brian square in the chest, sending him backward into the grass with tremendous force. The bear's forepaws came down hard, pinning him to the ground. Its head lowered, delivering a series of devastating bites to his head and upper torso. The attack was brutal and efficient, each movement calculated to neutralize the perceived threat. His friends screamed and threw rocks from a distance. The attack lasted several seconds before the bear broke contact, turning back toward the carcass. Brian lay motionless in the trampled grass. One friend ran to him while the other fumbled for the bear spray, though the animal had already resumed feeding. Attempts to find a pulse failed immediately. Visible injuries included deep lacerations to the scalp, puncture wounds across the rib cage, and extensive crushing damage to the sternum. There were no defensive wounds on his arms, suggesting he had been unable to shield himself before the initial impact. The Rangers arrived within 40 minutes, having been alerted by another hiking party that heard the desperate shouts echoing across the valley. The carcass site was marked and later closed off for the remainder of the season. The grizzly was not tracked or removed, as officials decided it had behaved in a typical defensive manner when protecting its food source. Brian's funeral was held quietly in Pocatello the following week. Attendance was mostly family and close friends, with no media presence. The park installed additional bear activity signage at the Pelican Valley trailhead within the month, including explicit warnings against approaching wildlife for photographs. His phone was recovered from the grass about 10 feet from where he fell. The screen cracked, but the device still functional. The final image was blurred and chaotic, the frame half filled with his face and the brown arc of the bear's shoulder in the background.
It was March 8th, 2018, at the Metropolitan Zoo in Ohio, where concrete enclosures and reinforced glass barriers created artificial habitats for some of the world's most powerful primates. The facility housed a troop of western lowland gorillas in a complex system of indoor holding areas, connected to outdoor exhibits through sliding doors and transfer tunnels. Morning routines began before public hours, with keepers conducting health checks and performing maintenance tasks that required temporary separation of animals from their living spaces. Juniper Blake, a 24-year-old zookeeper and primatology student, had worked with this particular gorilla troop for 3 years, developing what she believed was a mutual understanding with each individual animal. Her colleagues respected her patience and gentle approach, noting how the gorillas seemed calmer during her shifts. The facility operated under strict protocols that mandated protected contact between humans and great apes, with multiple redundant safety systems designed to prevent direct encounters. Electronic locks controlled all access points, backed up by manual bolt systems that required physical engagement to secure. Recent power fluctuations had triggered intermittent faults in the electronic systems, prompting maintenance crews to inspect and reset various components throughout the week. The morning shift change had created a brief communication gap regarding the status of certain manual locks. Juniper entered what she believed was a secure maintenance corridor to clean and restock enrichment materials, following standard procedures that had been routine for years. The combination of electronic malfunction and human oversight had created a scenario that the facility's safety protocols were designed to prevent. Silverback gorillas are immensely powerful animals capable of generating tremendous force through their muscular arms and hands. Adult males can weigh up to 400 pounds and possess strength estimated at 10 times that of an average human. Despite their generally peaceful nature, gorillas are highly territorial and will respond aggressively to perceived threats within their domain. When startled or confronted unexpectedly, a silverback's defensive response involves rapid charging, grabbing, and striking with enough force to cause severe blunt trauma. Their massive hands can crush bones, while their powerful arms can throw adult humans significant distances. Juniper had completed half of her cleaning routine when Kibo, the troop's 400-pound silverback, appeared suddenly around a corner in the service corridor. The electronic lock failure had allowed him access to an area that should have remained sealed, while the manual backup bolt had not been properly engaged during the previous shift. The unexpected encounter startled both human and animal in the narrow concrete space. Kibo's territorial instincts triggered an immediate aggressive response to what he perceived as an intrusion into his domain. He charged forward and grabbed Juniper's left arm with his massive hand, the grip force instantly fracturing her radius and ulna bones. The silverback then lifted and threw her against the concrete wall with tremendous force. Her shoulders separated on impact as she crashed to the floor, multiple ribs cracking against the unforgiving surface. Kibo followed up by grabbing her leg and dragging her across the rough concrete, the abrasive surface tearing through her uniform and skin. He then positioned himself over her prone form and delivered a series of crushing, open-handed strikes and slams, the typical method by which silverbacks overpower threats. The impacts fractured several vertebrae and caused massive internal bleeding as organs were compressed against the rib cage. A final strike to her chest compressed her heart and lungs, causing immediate cardiac arrest. The entire attack lasted less than 2 minutes, with Kibo's overwhelming physical superiority making resistance impossible. Death resulted from multiple traumatic injuries, including spinal fractures, internal hemorrhaging, and cardiac trauma, caused by the sustained blunt force assault. Zoo emergency protocols activated immediately when motion sensors detected unusual activity in the corridor. Security teams used remote systems to guide Kibo back to his holding area, while medical personnel attempted resuscitation. Paramedics pronounced Juniper dead at the scene due to the severity of her injuries. The facility underwent immediate lockdown pending investigation by both zoo authorities and occupational safety officials. Examination revealed the dual failure of electronic and manual security systems that had created the fatal breach. The zoo implemented enhanced redundancy measures, including mandatory dual-person verification for all lock systems and upgraded electronic monitoring with battery backup power. Juniper's family established a memorial fund supporting primate research and keeper safety training programs.
The morning of June 18, 2022 was perfect for a family outing in northern Arizona. Melinda Straith had been looking forward to her family trip to Arizona Wildlife Park for weeks. At 34, the elementary school teacher from Phoenix had meticulously planned every detail of their weekend getaway to Williams, Arizona. Her husband James had initially been reluctant about the trip, preferring their usual weekend hikes to what he called the tourist traps. But Melinda had convinced him that their children would benefit from seeing animals in a more natural setting than a traditional zoo. They decided on the SUV drive-through portion of the experience, where visitors could observe larger animals from the safety of their vehicles. The park rules were clear. Stay inside your vehicle at all times, keep windows closed, maintain a slow speed, and do not stop except in designated areas. It was as they entered the black bear enclosure that things began to go wrong. Melinda, who had been prone to migraine since her teens, felt the familiar pressure building behind her right eye. She had forgotten to pack her medication. Melinda quietly asked James if they could switch places, as the glare was making her migraine worse. They were in a section of the bear habitat. A sign clearly marked "No Stopping" was posted at the entrance to this area, but James, focused on his wife's discomfort, either didn't notice or chose to ignore it. Melinda pulled the SUV to the side of the dirt road and put it in park. James explained to the children that their mother wasn't feeling well, so they were going to switch seats quickly. He unbuckled his seatbelt, but Melinda was the first one to exit the vehicle, leaving the door open. What neither James nor Melinda realized was that they had stopped near a fallen log where a young male black bear had been napping. As Melinda stepped out of the vehicle, the sudden movement caught the bear's attention. A family in the car behind them honked their horn in warning, startling both her and the bear. Black bears are opportunistic omnivores with remarkable problem-solving intelligence that allows them to overcome most human deterrents. Capable of running at 35 miles per hour, delivering powerful swipes with their 4-inch claws, making them particularly dangerous when startled at close range. Melinda, already unsteady due to her migraine, turned too quickly and lost her balance, stumbling on the dirt road. The bear, now just 15 yards away, was startled by the commotion and the honking. It charged forward, covering the distance between itself and Melinda in seconds. A defensive reaction by the black bear. James lunged toward his wife, trying to pull her back, but the bear reached her first. The bear attacked with a series of powerful swipes from its front paws, each tipped with 3-inch claws that tore through Melinda's clothing and into her back and shoulders. As she collapsed from the initial assault, the bear then delivered multiple bites to her neck and head. The children, still in the back seat, screamed in terror as they watched the attack. Park rangers, alerted by the honking and commotion, arrived within minutes, armed with tranquilizer guns and bear spray. They managed to drive the bear away from Melinda's body and secure the area, but it was immediately clear that their intention had come too late. It was September 3rd, 2023, when Tobias Quill headed to Northern California's Mount Shasta region, expecting a thrilling birthday adventure. The 27-year-old YouTuber, known online as Toby Gone Wild, a now deleted channel, had built his modest following on increasingly dangerous stunts he called birthday dares. Each year he pushed the boundaries further: cliff jumps, fire breathing, mock bull runs, all broadcast to his growing audience. Tobias never had a steady job. Living out of a converted van with his camera equipment, he thrived on spectacle and reactions. His channel featured stunts that teetered between foolhardy and suicidal: hand-feeding coyotes, wrestling near rattlesnake nests, biking blindfolded down gravel trails. Friends had tried to intervene, especially after a rooftop parkour incident in San Diego that nearly shattered both ankles. But Tobias didn't care. Pain passed. Views lasted. That year, however, his subscriber count had stagnated. The algorithm had cooled, so he set his sights on something primal, something that would break the internet. His plan was simple: spot a wild bear, approach calmly, and give it a birthday hug. Just a quick, symbolic one for the camera. No cages, no zoo glass, just him, a bear, and what he called bravery. That crisp September morning, Tobias had read reports on a hiking forum about recent bear activity near a campground trailhead. Locals had complained about trash bins being overturned and growls at night, and that only excited him. He packed his camera gear and a stick of beef jerky as bait, then headed out before sunrise. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. A black bear, easily over 300 pounds, had torn the lid off a metal dumpster behind a row of cabins and was snout deep in discarded food wrappers. Tobias kept his distance at first, zooming in with a long lens. But then, emboldened, he began his ritual, setting up the tripod, speaking into the camera with shaky excitement, bragging about how this would be the craziest birthday ever. The bear, focused on its meal, ignored him. He paced in front of the lens, working himself up, repeating phrases like, "Trust in nature," and "It's all energy." He tossed the jerky in the bear's direction, not to feed it, he claimed, but to establish trust. The bear sniffed, looked up, and licked its chops. Tobias mistook that for curiosity. What he failed to grasp, what most humans fail to understand, is that wild bears, especially American black bears, aren't slow or docile like in cartoons. Though smaller than their grizzly cousins, black bears are still powerful predators with strong territorial instincts. They can sprint up to 35 miles per hour, climb trees, swim across lakes, and rip through flesh with one swing of their claws. The bear, now done with the dumpster, caught Tobias in its peripheral vision. It rose halfway onto its hind legs, ears angled forward, sensing motion and noise. Still, Tobias approached, arms spread in some twisted image of affection. He was 5 feet away when the bear lowered itself, grunted, and charged. The camera captured it all. The sound of Tobias gasping, the slap of paws on earth, the scream cut short as the bear lunged. It bowled him over in a second. The camera shook wildly on its tripod, capturing blurred leaves, flashes of movement, and chilling growls. The attack didn't last long, less than a minute, but the bear dragged him by the arm into the nearby brush, out of frame. When Tobias failed to check in with friends later that evening, they used GPS data from his van to track his location. Rangers found the abandoned campsite and the camera still recording on a drained battery. His shredded backpack lay beside the dumpster. Blood was spattered across the pine needles. His body wasn't recovered until the following morning, partially buried beneath a pile of leaves. The bear, startled by approaching searchers, fled the area. Wildlife officials later confirmed the bear had been food conditioned and had likely viewed Tobias as both threat and prey once he approached its feeding zone. The footage made its way to law enforcement. Though quickly removed from most platforms, clips circulated like wildfire. Some viewers were horrified, others celebrated Tobias as a martyr to wild living. But most were just appalled by the sheer stupidity of it all. People weighed in online, repeating the same exhausted facts. Never approach a wild bear, never feed one, never assume safety just because an animal looks calm. It wasn't hate or aggression that killed Tobias Quill, it was an animal responding exactly how nature designed it to. His YouTube channel remained online for a few weeks before being memorialized. But Tobias' story is far from unique. In a world hungry for clicks and fame, reckless thrill seekers keep gambling with wild nature and losing. No lesson learned, no tragedy changing the game. Just another name lost to the brutal truth. Nature doesn't bend for human foolishness, and the algorithm's hunger never dies.
It was September 8, 2014, and the crisp mountain air carried the scent of pine and approaching autumn, as Derek Hoffman loaded his tools for another day of trail maintenance in Glacier National Park's backcountry. The 41-year-old maintenance worker had been employed by the National Park Service for 8 years, during which time he had encountered grizzly bears on dozens of occasions without incident. Derek's colleagues often joked that he was more comfortable around bears than most tourists were around squirrels. Derek had grown up in northwestern Montana, where encounters with large wildlife were simply part of daily life. His extensive experience in bear country had taught him to recognize signs of bear activity and to respond appropriately when encounters occurred. Park supervisors had been forced to allow solo work assignments due to severe budget cuts and understaffing, despite policies that recommended buddy systems in high-risk areas. The morning's assignment involved repairing a damaged trail marker approximately 3 miles from the nearest road. in an area known for heavy grizzly activity during the fall feeding season. Derek had hiked the trail countless times and was familiar with the local bear population's seasonal patterns and preferred feeding areas throughout this section of the park. Grizzly bears are among North America's most powerful predators, with adult males weighing up to 800 pounds and possessing incredible strength and speed. These massive omnivores can run up to 35 miles per hour and are capable of crushing a bowling ball with their jaws, which can exert over 1,200 pounds of pressure per square inch. Grizzlies are particularly dangerous during fall months when they enter hyperphagia, a feeding frenzy designed to build fat reserves for winter hibernation. As Derek worked on replacing the damaged trail sign, he was focused on his repair work when he heard rustling sounds in the dense vegetation nearby. The thick understory of huckleberry bushes and young pine trees limited visibility to just a few yards in any direction, creating perfect conditions for surprise encounters with wildlife. Derek's fatal mistake came when he decided to investigate the source of the noise rather than following protocol to make noise and slowly retreat from the area. His curiosity about what might be feeding in the berry bushes overcame his professional training, and he quietly moved through the dense vegetation to get a better view. The thick brush concealed his approach until he suddenly found himself within 15 feet of a massive grizzly bear. The grizzly's reaction was immediate and violent when Derek's sudden appearance startled the feeding bear. The massive animal's head snapped up from the berry bushes, his small eyes focusing instantly on the human intruder who had appeared without warning. The bear's ears flattened against his skull as he dropped to all fours and charged with explosive speed, covering the short distance in less than 2 seconds. Derek attempted to run, but immediately tripped over his scattered tools, falling heavily to the forest floor as 600 pounds of enraged grizzly bore down on him. The bear's massive paws struck Derek's back and shoulders with tremendous force, driving him face first into the rocky ground, while razor-sharp claws raked across his spine and ribs. The grizzly delivered several powerful swipes to Derek's torso and head, using his tremendous weight to pin Derek against the ground. The bear's defensive attack lasted approximately 12 seconds as his territorial instincts drove him to neutralize the perceived threat. The grizzly's powerful strikes caused massive blunt trauma to Derek's chest and skull, while his claws opened deep wounds that resulted in severe internal injuries. Derek's movements ceased quickly as the combination of trauma overwhelmed his system, and the grizzly immediately disengaged once Derek stopped struggling. After ensuring the threat was eliminated, the grizzly retreated to resume his interrupted feeding, leaving Derek's lifeless body among the scattered trail maintenance tools. Derek died from a combination of blunt force trauma, internal injuries, and secondary bleeding caused by the bear's defensive assault. Derek's body was discovered 2 days later by a hiking party who immediately contacted park rangers via emergency radio. The investigation revealed that Derek had approached well within the danger zone that park protocols required employees to maintain around feeding bears. The responsible grizzly was tracked but not destroyed, as wildlife officials determined the bear had been defending his natural feeding territory. The incident prompted immediate reviews of solo work policies in bear country, with new regulations requiring radio check-ins and buddy system protocols for remote maintenance activities. Derek's death became a tragic reminder that even experienced professionals can fall victim to overconfidence when dealing with unpredictable wildlife. It was September 3, 2017, in Glacier National Park, Montana, where autumn had begun to paint the high country in shades of gold and crimson. The morning air carried the crisp bite of approaching winter, and frost still clung to shadowed patches of grass along the trail system. Dense stands of lodgepole pine and Douglas fir created corridors of filtered sunlight, while thick undergrowth of huckleberry bushes offered the last sweet fruit before the season turned. Orrin Miller, a 67-year-old retired librarian from Portland, had driven up alone for what he considered a routine hike on paths he had walked for 2 decades. His family knew him as methodical and careful, a gentleman who had never missed his annual pilgrimage to these mountains. What they did not fully understand was that his memory had begun to falter in subtle ways, creating gaps in his usually reliable navigation skills. He carried no bear spray that morning, confident in his familiarity with the area and his long history of peaceful encounters with wildlife. The trail he intended to follow was well marked and heavily used, but the network of intersecting paths and old logging roads created opportunities for confusion. Thick brush limited visibility in many sections, and the abundance of ripe berries had drawn both human visitors and the park's substantial grizzly population to the same general area. The combination of reduced mental clarity, dense vegetation, and active bear feeding zones would prove catastrophic. Grizzly bears in late summer and early fall focus intensively on hyperphagia, the process of consuming massive quantities of food to build fat reserves for winter hibernation. Sows with cubs of the year are particularly defensive during this period, as they must protect their offspring while competing for limited high-calorie food sources. A female grizzly with cubs will typically establish a feeding territory around productive berry patches and respond aggressively to any perceived threat within that zone. These bears rely on their exceptional hearing and sense of smell to detect approaching danger, but dense vegetation can create situations where humans and bears encounter each other at dangerously close range. When surprised or cornered, a protective sow will launch a defensive attack designed to neutralize the threat and create distance for her cubs to escape. Oren missed a familiar trail junction and continued into increasingly thick brush, following what appeared to be a maintained path, but was actually an old game trail. He pushed through waist-high huckleberry bushes heavy with fruit, unaware that he was approaching an active feeding site. A female grizzly with 2 cubs of the year had been working the patch for several hours, methodically stripping berries while her offspring played and fed nearby. The wind direction prevented the bear from detecting Oren's approach until he stepped into a small clearing less than 20 yards from the family group. The sudden appearance of a human triggered an immediate defensive response. The sow charged without hesitation, covering the distance in seconds. Her massive forepaw struck Oren's chest with tremendous force, knocking him backward and causing him to stumble into a fallen log. The impact shattered multiple ribs and drove fragments into his lung tissue. As he fell, the bear followed up with a bite to his left shoulder, her powerful jaws crushing the collarbone and tearing through muscle and tendons. She then raked her claws across his torso, opening deep parallel wounds from his chest to his abdomen. The bear's weight pressed down on his broken ribs, forcing air from his punctured lung and preventing him from drawing breath. Blood filled his chest cavity as internal bleeding accelerated. The bear delivered a final bite to his head, causing severe cranial trauma. Defensive grizzly attacks often involve powerful bites to disable a perceived threat before withdrawing. The entire attack lasted less than 30 seconds. Death resulted from the combination of severe head injuries, massive internal bleeding, and respiratory failure caused by the punctured lung and crushed chest. Search and rescue teams located Oren's body the following morning after his failure to return prompted a missing person report. The scene showed clear evidence of a defensive bear attack, with tracks and scat confirming the presence of a sow with cubs in the immediate area. Park officials temporarily closed several trails while wildlife specialists monitored bear activity and assessed public safety risks. The medical examiner's report documented multiple traumatic injuries consistent with a grizzly bear mauling, emphasizing the defensive nature of the encounter. Oren's family released a statement expressing their understanding that the bear was protecting her cubs and requested that no action be taken against the animal. The incident prompted renewed discussions about mandatory bear spray requirements and improved trail signage in high-density bear habitat. Park Service officials enhanced their educational programs about proper food storage and hiking protocols in bear country, while also reviewing trail maintenance schedules to ensure adequate sightlines in areas where bears and humans frequently intersect.
The morning of July 15, 2016 dawned foggy and cool along the northern California coastline. The beaches of Pacifica were shrouded in a dense mist that limited visibility to just a few yards. But Thomas Greeley was not deterred. At 39, Thomas lived his life by a strict set of routines. The investment banker would wake up at precisely 5:15 a.m., brew a cup of black coffee, stretch for exactly 7 minutes, and then drive to Rockaway Beach for his morning swim. Thomas would be in the water by 6 a.m., swimming parallel to the shoreline for exactly 1 mile. The only area where Thomas allowed himself any spontaneity was in the water. A former collegiate swimmer at Stanford, he found freedom in the ocean that eluded him on land. In the weeks leading up to his fatal swim, Pacifica had experienced an unusual number of shark sightings. For 3 days, Thomas had respected these closures, reluctantly using the pool at his gym instead. But on the 4th day, his frustration got the better of him. As Thomas parked his Tesla in the empty beach lot that foggy morning, he could barely see the ocean through the dense mist. He changed into his wetsuit, grabbed his orange swim cap and goggles, and made his way down to the shoreline. The water was colder than usual, around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, but Thomas barely noticed as he waded in up to his waist. He dove forward into the gentle swell, beginning his familiar crawl stroke parallel to the beach. The fog created an eerie cocoon around him, limiting visibility to just a few feet in any direction. Thomas had been in the water for approximately 20 minutes when suddenly something subtle changed in the water. There was no dramatic fin slicing through the surface, just a slight pressure wave, the kind created by a large object moving through the water. Great whites hunt with methodical precision, striking from below with enough force to launch their massive bodies out of the water, delivering test bites with serrated teeth that slice through flesh, a strategy that makes swimmers particularly vulnerable. This is when Thomas became their food. He was struck from beneath, taken underwater, the shark's jaws clamping around his torso and left leg with devastating force. The initial bite was shockingly painless, a phenomenon reported by many shark attack survivors due to the body's release of adrenaline and endorphins. What Thomas felt was an immense pressure, like being caught in a car compactor. The shark released him momentarily, and Thomas kicked desperately toward the surface with his uninjured leg. As his head broke through the water, he gasped for air and screamed for help. About 600 feet away, an early morning beach walker heard the commotion and immediately called 911. Thomas managed to stay afloat for nearly a minute when the great white shark turned its attention back to him. When the shark struck again, it took Thomas from behind, its teeth severing his femoral artery. By the time the Coast Guard helicopter arrived 30 minutes later, rescuers reported a massive blood slick in the water and a large marine predator moving in the area. Thomas was pronounced dead at the hospital. Further investigation revealed that Thomas's car was parked right in front of a shark warning sign, and records showed that he had been verbally warned twice by beach patrols the previous month. It was November 8, 2020. Local resident Tommy Raskin prepared for what he called the big one, a live stream featuring his 18-foot reticulated python, Cleo, in Kissimmee, Florida, a home to a thriving exotic pet community despite strict regulations. Tommy, age 32, grew up in Central Florida where he developed an early fascination with reptiles, spending countless hours at local nature centers and reptile expos. After high school, he worked various low-wage jobs but never pursued higher education or formal training in herpetology. His modest YouTube channel, focused almost exclusively on his reticulated python Cleo, reflected years of self-taught knowledge, though experts often criticized his handling techniques as risky and unprofessional. He was no celebrity. With fewer than 800 YouTube subscribers, he posted videos of Cleo slithering across his arms or feeding on thawed rabbits. By day, he drove for Uber and stocked shelves at a pet store. He lived alone, his social circle limited to online forums and reptile expos. His modest house was quiet except for his collection: several lizards, a small caiman, and Cleo, whom he considered special. He had acquired Cleo 4 years earlier when she was barely 2 feet long. He raised her methodically, with feeding schedules charted on a whiteboard and humidity levels recorded in spreadsheets. As she grew, his content began to revolve solely around her. Friends stopped calling. His sister blocked him after he missed her wedding to medicate Cleo. But Tommy didn't care. He believed he was proving that reptiles weren't just dumb killers. That fateful evening, Tommy prepared his camera for a live stream that would change everything. His plan was absurdly simple: lie shirtless on the floor, cover himself in rabbit scent, and record Cleo's reaction. He titled it, "What Happens If I Pretend to Be Prey?" Several subscribers urged him not to do it. One warned that pythons don't think the way humans hope. But Tommy, ever confident, insisted Cleo had never bitten him. After months of planning for this viral moment, Tommy couldn't contain his excitement. He took a thawed rabbit and rubbed its scent across his bare chest and arms as viewers began joining the stream. He positioned himself on the floor of the enclosure, smiling at the camera. As comments poured in, he drifted further into his fantasy, ignoring the danger lurking in the corner. Reticulated pythons are ambush predators, especially when presented with prey-scented, warm bodies. Pythons don't attack out of malice, they attack because millions of years of evolution had programmed them to associate those specific stimuli with food. A snake doesn't recognize your history together, your voice, or your intentions. It only recognizes feeding cues and threat cues, and a warm body covered in prey scent will always register as a feeding opportunity. Cleo approached slowly, tasting the air with her tongue. The smell drew her closer to Tommy, who lay peacefully on the floor. She raised her head, muscles tensed and ready. With lightning speed, she struck, wrapping her massive coils around his torso. He gasped in pain, trying to free himself as the snake constricted tighter with each exhaled breath. Viewers frantically typed warnings in the chat. They pleaded for someone to call 911, desperately trying to identify his location. By the time authorities forced their way into Tommy's home nearly an hour later, they found Cleo midway through consuming him. Her jaws stretched impossibly wide around his upper torso, slick with saliva. His legs were motionless, already halfway engulfed, and the pressure of her muscular coils had long since stopped his heart. Circulation to his brain had been cut off within minutes, and his internal organs were compressed beyond recovery. What was supposed to be a breakthrough viral video had turned into the most grotesque python attack in Florida's exotic pet history. The massive reticulated python that ended the 32-year-old's life remains housed at a secure facility, a living reminder of what happens when humans forget the untamed nature of apex predators. In the weeks that followed, Tommy's channel didn't go viral, it curdled. Viewers who once cheered his confidence now picked apart every interaction with Cleo, replaying moments where the warning signs flickered like static behind a smile. One clip showed her coiled loosely around his shoulders as he read fan comments aloud. Another caught her tightening on his wrist for a breath too long. He always laughed and would say that she was just feeling cuddly. Animal control removed her that same evening. She was deemed non-releasable and transferred to a private reptile facility where she remains in solitary containment. No name on her enclosure, just a cage, a heat lamp, and silence. On a brisk autumn afternoon in 2009, Carol Hennigan was preparing for a small dinner party at her sprawling estate in Stamford, Connecticut. The 61-year-old wealthy widow moved efficiently through her kitchen, occasionally glancing out the window at her 5-acre property with its manicured gardens and the custom-built addition that housed her most prized possession, a 120-pound male chimpanzee named Maxie. Carol had acquired Maxie when he was just an infant. Over the years, she had raised him as if he were her child, dressing him in human clothes, teaching him to use the toilet, and even allowing him to sit at the dinner table where he would drink wine. What Carol failed to understand, despite numerous warnings from primatologists, was that despite their human-like appearance, adult male chimpanzees possess explosive strength up to 8 times greater than the strongest human athletes, with unpredictable mood swings that can transform them from playful to territorial aggressors in seconds. There had been warning signs over the years. When Maxie was 10, he had bitten a delivery man. 3 years later, he had attacked a neighbor's teenage son. Both incidents had resulted in lawsuits that Carol quietly settled using her wealth, refusing to acknowledge the escalating danger. Maxie had been agitated all morning, pacing his enclosure and occasionally letting out sharp barking sounds. Concerned that he might disrupt her evening plans, Carol decided to give him a special treat, a glass of wine and some of his favorite strawberry ice cream. She entered his enclosure and bent down to place the tray on Maxie's table when the chimpanzee lunged at her with explosive violence. With his unpredictable sudden outburst, he tore away skin and tissue using his powerful hands. Maxie's assault was instinctual and devastatingly effective, targeting the face, hands, and genitals as chimpanzees naturally do in aggressive conflicts. Carol screamed, alerting her housekeeper, who immediately called emergency services. When police arrived, they found Maxie still in a state of frenzied aggression, his fur matted with Carol's blood. Officers broke into the enclosure, and when Maxie charged at them, they were forced to shoot him multiple times. Carol was still alive when paramedics reached her, though barely. The damage to her face was catastrophic. Her eyes, nose, and lips had been torn away. Despite the best efforts of emergency medical personnel and surgeons, Carol Hennigan died from her injuries 3 days later. It was September 14, 2018, and the air in Manaus hung heavy with late afternoon heat. The municipal zoo's palm-lined entrance buzzed with the muffled hum of traffic, mixing with the sharp calls of caged parrots. As crowds thinned, a group of young men staggered toward the feline exhibits. Paulo Ferreira leaned against the railing, unaware of the foolish mistake he just made. Paulo was 22, born and raised in Manaus. Unemployed for nearly a year, he'd spent most of his time with a tight-knit circle from his neighborhood, passing hours between bars, pickup soccer games, and occasional fishing trips. Locals knew him for his impulsive streak, often framed as humor among friends, but bordering on reckless when alcohol was involved. He carried a reputation for stupid stunts to draw laughter or prove a point, often inviting someone to record the moment. That afternoon, he and 4 others had been drinking steadily since early lunch. By the time they reached the zoo, Paulo's movements had the loose coordination of intoxication, shoulders swaying, gestures drawn out. The idea began as a passing comment, one friend recalling a video of someone feeding a lion. Paulo raised the stakes immediately. He would touch a jaguar here, today, and collect 100 reais from whoever doubted him. His friends laughed at first, until he started walking toward the jaguar enclosure. Jaguars are the largest cats in the Americas, weighing up to 250 pounds and possessing the strongest bite force of any big cat. Their massive jaws can exert over 1,500 pounds per square inch, enough to crush turtle shells and pierce crocodile skulls. Unlike other big cats that kill by suffocation, jaguars deliver a crushing bite designed to pierce skull or shell, often killing prey instantly with a single devastating attack to the head or neck. The jaguar habitat was a dirt and grass pen, roughly half an acre, with scattered logs and a shallow pool. A waist-high public barrier kept the visitors at least 10 feet back from the inner chain-link fence. Inside, a single adult male jaguar lay half in shadow, tail curling lazily against the ground. The signage around the enclosure was direct. Danger. Do not cross barrier in Portuguese and English. Paulo glanced at the signs without slowing. Witnesses later recalled him stepping over the outer barrier in one motion. One friend raised the phone, the other shouting mixed encouragement and warning. From inside the enclosure, the jaguar lifted its head, its ears angled forward, body sinking low to the ground in a slow crouch. This was the classic hunting posture of an apex predator. Muscles coiled, weight shifted to the hindquarters, preparing for an explosive burst of speed. Paulo moved closer, closing the distance to within 8 feet, knees slightly bent as he leaned toward the chain link. His whistle cut through the enclosure, short and sharp. In a blur of movement, the cat surged forward with shocking speed. The initial contact was at Paulo's right leg. The jaguar's jaws clamped around his calf with bone-crushing force. momentum pulling him against the fence and then dragging him inward through the narrow gap at the gate's base, where keepers passed food trays. Paolo's scream was high and urgent, overlapping with shouts of onlookers. The animal released its grip on his leg, only to seize the back of his neck. The killing bite jaguars used to dispatch prey instantly. Its forepaws braced in the dirt as it began the violent shaking that would prove fatal. Two zookeepers, alerted by the crowd's noise, ran to the scene. One carried a slab of meat from the nearby kitchen, waving it toward the cat in an attempt to draw its attention. The other shouted for the public to step back. Paolo's legs kicked once, then still. His shirt had pulled up toward his shoulders, revealing deep gashes along his side where the jaguar's claws had raked across his torso. The jaguar kept its jaws locked until one keeper managed to wedge the meat between its forelegs. The cat backed off a few paces, head low, watching as the keepers pulled Paolo away. The attack had lasted less than 30 seconds, but idiocy had taken its toll. Medical staff on site attempted resuscitation within minutes, but the injuries were too severe. The neck wounds had severed major vessels, and massive blood loss had occurred within minutes. The absence of a pulse was noted almost immediately. Authorities later confirmed death by cervical trauma and exsanguination. Police took statements and seized all recorded material as evidence. In their official statement, zoo authorities emphasized that the animal would not be euthanized, as the incident had been provoked, and the jaguar's behavior was consistent with its natural instincts. The zoo closed the jaguar exhibit for a week, adding a second row of steel bars in front of the visitor railing before reopening. Paolo's funeral in Manaus was closed casket, held 2 days later at a small chapel near his family's home. Attendance was limited to relatives and a few neighbors. His mother declined all interviews, her grief too profound for public consumption.
It was July 15, 2016, at a public viewing lagoon off a boardwalk in Everglades National Park, Florida. Heat shimmered over shallow, brackish water bordered by mangroves, buttonwood, and mats of sawgrass. Wading birds worked the edges, and mullet flashed in tight schools just beneath the surface. Posted signs warned visitors to stay back from the waterline and to remain on the planks, where railings and distance kept people separate from the wildlife that used the narrow, muddy shallows as ambush corridors. The Kincaid family had come on a day off to walk the loop and point out wetland species. The father knew the area well from his ranger work. The mother kept their youngest close, and their teenager Tallulah moved ahead with quick steps. Earlier on the trail, they had watched an alligator slide from a bank, and talk turned to the differences between the freshwater alligator and the rarer coastal American crocodile that favored this estuarine pocket. The place felt deceptively calm. Still water film, cicadas, distant thunderheads building over the bay. The family's purpose was simple: a short educational stop before the afternoon storms. The warning signs, the proximity of open water to low, slick mud, and the visibility of basking reptiles along the margins together set a clear boundary that many visitors observed, a boundary that in this case would be crossed. The American crocodile is a large, primarily nocturnal ambush predator that rests motionless along edges where land and water meet. It detects prey through vibration and pressure changes and can transition from stillness to a short, explosive surge in a fraction of a second. In shallow water, its preferred tactic is a forward lunge, jaws closing on a limb or body part, followed by a backward pull to deeper water and rotational maneuvers that disable and disorient. Death rolls do not always dismember. They serve to destabilize and to remove leverage from anything resisting at the edge. A crocodile that appears inert can be within striking distance if a person stands or leans close enough to the water with feet on the slick bank. Although American crocodiles tend to avoid heavily trafficked boardwalk areas, individuals occasionally rest near shallow public lagoons, particularly juveniles and subadults that use predictable warm water pockets. Adult crocs typically remain more wary of large groups of people. but individual animals can habituate enough to lie within view of walkways. Tallulah left the boardwalk at a gap in the railing where a beaten footpath ran a few yards to the lagoon edge. She picked up a stick and threw small debris at a crocodile lying partly submerged with its tail and a portion of its back exposed. She stepped within 2 to 3 feet of the waterline and extended the stick toward the animal, tapping the surface. The trigger was the disturbance at close range combined with her location inside the crocodile's reach. The animal surged forward in a short, explosive burst, water pushing outward in a low wave as the jaws opened. The bite closed across her lower right leg and ankle. The force pulled her forward. Mud gave way underfoot and she lost her stance. The crocodile immediately reversed toward deeper water. As her body entered the shallows, it initiated a rotational maneuver. The first roll torqued the lower limb, producing fractures around the ankle and lower leg and stripping her of any ability to stand. She went into chest-deep water still held by the bite. The crocodile paused its rotation briefly, maintaining its grip, rather than continuing multiple full rolls, which are uncommon unless the animal is attempting to dismember prey. It used small twisting motions to destabilize her and pull her farther from the edge. The second rotation submerged her completely, displacing air and removing orientation. Attempts from the boardwalk to reach her with hands were impossible due to distance and the animal's control of the movement. The crocodile did not release. It maintained the hold and continued short, controlled spins that kept her below the surface. Soft tissue damage compounded with the fractures, and water entered her airway. Within minutes, the combination of submersion and the inability to gain leverage led to drowning. When the crocodile stopped rotating, it maintained a stationary hold in slightly deeper water until human presence along the shore diminished. The sequence followed the species' known pattern: rapid strike at the edge, backward pull, rotational disabling, and submergence until there was no further resistance. Response began within minutes. Bystanders alerted rangers, who closed the boardwalk, coordinated with wildlife officers, and staged a recovery using boats and poles from a safer access point downstream. A search of the lagoon located the crocodile still in the vicinity. Non-lethal hazing moved it away so divers could enter. The medical examiner documented drowning as the primary cause of death with contributory blunt and crushing trauma to the right lower limb, consistent with a crocodilian bite and rotational force. Park officials reviewed signage, rail placement, and informal footpaths leading off the boardwalk. Additional fencing and clearer visual barriers were added, and staff increased patrols at high-use pullouts during peak hours. Public reaction included calls for stricter enforcement at popular wildlife overlooks and renewed education about edge distance, especially where shallow mudslopes lead directly into inhabited water. The family released a short statement through the Park Service asking visitors to respect posted limits and the hazards of standing close to water in crocodile habitat. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more? Click on your screen now.